Welcome to the On-Meta report for Company of Heroes 3 covering September 2025. In this video, I'm going to be sharing my view on what is the most viable on-meta strategies for each faction in 1v1, and I'll be doing this by explaining the units, battle groups, techs, and analysing how they're being used effectively to win. I'll also give you an understanding of how to counter the metagame so you feel comfortable to verse these strategies yourself. The metagame is currently being set upon build orders that offer high quantities of units and capture rates in the early game to create a snowballing advantage. This is followed by investment into low-tech structure to create an advantage through high pressure and deny the opponent the opportunity to tech. Key units shaping the metagame include the allied scouts and their evolutions, the weapon support center roster, infantry sections, and for Axis, pioneers, grenadiers, 221 scout cars, and the battlegroups. In patch Opal Scorpion 2.14, we continue to see US forces dictating the metagame. Looking at the top 1600 in the ELO, which is around the top 100 players, we can see that the win rate is at 56%. So why is this occurring? This patch is rewarding high capping power early games and the capacity to hold that territory. US forces do this the best, and they are forcing Axis factions to come along for the ride. US forces are able to quickly cap the map with multiple scouts and lock down that map with a conversion to a combat-capable Pathfinder or Artillery Observer unit. Simply put, this early game capping power is unmatched, and the quantity of units it places on the early battlefield can be partially opposed with DAC Bursa Bike earlier games, or Pioneer Grenadier 221 Scout Car with rapid capture and production breakthrough tactics. Scouts guiding the weapon support sensor units of heavy machine gun, bazookas, and half-tracks is forcing Axis players to use risky and aggressive strategies to prevent the USF early territorial gains. Axis forces can struggle with this as it comes with risk, as being at a constant vision disadvantage, especially when you factor in the changes to captured points, which no longer provide vision in patches 2.1. It increases the level of risk for Axis infantry to move from cover to cover, because the scouts will always be watching them and the grenadiers can't see them. There is a good window of opportunity for the allied player. At higher ELO ranges, the synergy between scouts, heavy machine guns, and bazookas are being used to a great effect. The constant vision advantage the scouts provide is unmatched and leads to consistently safe and easy decision-making processes. Picking the correct fights to defend or be aggressive is a pillar of success in Company of Heroes, and the Pathfinders or Artillery Observers' constant vision advantage makes this happen. Not to mention, Pathfinders and Artillery Observers can compete combat cost and time effectively with any Axis mainline infantry squad. Let's explore the current on-meta strategies in detail and how they can be countered. We will be starting with US forces, as, like I said earlier, they are the trendsetters of the patch 2.14. Their strongest strategy involves getting multiple scout squads to quickly cap the map to get an early resource and territorial advantage. This allows the US forces' weapon support center units to be consistently in threatening but safe positions. The scouts are then evolved into Pathfinders or Artillery Observers to become over-competitive mainline infantry. Pathfinders allow for some better early game tempo through their arrival at 0 CPs once all the scouts have been constructed. However, Artillery Observers have a stronger late game stats with their cheaper reinforcement and reduced upkeep, which is about 2 mere power cheaper and on the reinforcement and 3 less in terms of upkeep. In the late game, this results in a few extra units, and the NBC infantry assault ability really allows US forces to overwhelm Axis. For the purpose of this on-meta report though, I will be focusing on the advanced infantry battle group by the Artillery Observer variant, as it's more common and I would consider it stronger. For the battle group, select Advanced Infantry Battle Group with the key options selected, including Artillery Observers first, and rounding it off with Designate Assault Position and Infantry Assault. Pick the remaining options to suit the game, but it's likely these 3 are all that you need to win the game from the battle group. The build order is to make scouts until you have 5 on the map. By getting scouts first, you have more capping power, send them to all sides of the map, cap it up, and then build the tier 2 weapon support center next to get the heavy machine gun if the Axis forces have a lot of infantry, or get a bazooka squad. Mainly it's applicable to DAC if there's a light vehicle, such as a 250 half-track on the field, to counter that. Against Wehrmacht, getting the bazooka as the 221 scout car comes out can be a good idea if you don't have the fuel yet for a half-track. Once the scouts are all built and you've got 1 CP, convert them into Artillery Observers. Go Infantry Support Center for the free captain and the infantry support upgrades. Getting the M3 half-track, you can keep it as standard to hit infantry, reinforce a little bit on the fields, but then converting it to an M3 quad for its anti-infantry upgrade, or the M3 75 AT upgrade will deal with all Axis vehicles from light vehicles into the medium tanks. The key technologies only include healing and the bazooka upgrade if you have a couple of bazooka squads or intend to spam the NPC infantry assault ability. The bazooka upgrade from the Weapon Support Center and the survival training from the Infantry Support Center, which is the health upgrade, allows everything to be boosted, including the NPC infantry that come out from the infantry assaults. Check out the narrated gameplay videos episode 176 and 177 to see how dominant this strategy is. Axis counter strategy needs to involve army compositions that enable Axis forces to be mobile via aggressive infantry or light vehicle based play. For DAC, this means using a Bersaglieri, bike, or infantry garrisons inside of a 250 half-track to prevent the scouts and the MGs from capping the map early. Restricting the US forces players' fuel control as much as possible with assault grenadiers, particularly through their assault disembark ability to remove any heavy machine gun positions quickly, and have a Panzerjäger lurking in the shadows to surprise a US forces half-track. Be mindful of the early USF bazooka squads, as if you do get caught into positions pushing with your vehicles where they have their range bonus, they will secure the kill. Do your best to fight where they are not by looking for them with your bike or infantry. For Wehrmacht, you can find strength in Grenadiers and the Scout Car. The flaks are relatively cheap and can pack a punch, especially to the US forces half-tracks and heavy machine guns, but don't get too many, as they become easy artillery observer targets through the artillery beacons. Committing to a heavy tier 1 and tier 2 build is the only way to try expose a weak point. It's hard though, and winning consistently is not easy. This US Forces build is overpowered. I have my fingers crossed that the upcoming patch will bring a change. Personally, I believe the artillery observers and pathfinders should remain at 3-man squads until Vet 3, when they could unlock the 4th man to improve durability. They shouldn't be mainline infantry in the early game with their massive vision advantage and current combat effectiveness, but I think their main role is to provide that utility to other US forces through vision and not prolonged combat. Bring back the rifle metagame is what I'd like to say. For Wehrmacht, the strategy is focused upon gaining map control quickly through early pioneers, mobile grenadiers, and the breakthrough ability via their battle group options and Tier 2 light vehicle based play. Breakthrough battle group provides the necessary tempo and counterplay to compete with early game aggression from the allied forces. Breakthrough and rapid construction for strong timings on the 221 Scout Car and Verbal Wind, whilst powerful punch call-ins are possible via the Stoss Troop and half-track or the formidable Tiger Tank. The build order starts with getting 3 Pioneers in total on the field and following up with 3 Grenadiers. You can consider getting a Flame Pioneer and merge into it for pushing power, or the MP40s for flanking power, but this early game starting composition allows for a lot of capping and, importantly, getting sandbags down on key territories so that you can defend them as the allies try to push. If you've got the fuel and manpower to tech to Tier 2 and build a 221 Scout Car, do so. If not, consider getting an MG42 to lock down the map. Attain healing when necessary. Generally, I get the healing via the Tier 0 base healing, and it keeps the fuel and munitions available for on-field aggression and better timing attacks. Consider getting a flak to deal with any half-tracks or infantry-held positions, whilst building resources to get the Verbal Wind or the Stoss Troop and call-in. I base this decision on if I need pushing power or mobility. The Stoss Troop can really effectively punish players who have overinvested in riflemen, Royal Engineers, or infantry sections that are screened by an anti-tank gun line, and you want to push onto a position where the Verbal Wind may otherwise fail. Otherwise, if mobility is required, especially if the allies have a well-balanced army composition with light vehicles, infantry, and support weapons, the Verbal Wind offers that better alternative to stretch them into a position where they might be caught out. Keep on making Verbal Winds, Martyrs, and a Jägerschreck to prevent a dive flank if necessary, and just keep on with that army composition until the Tiger Tank arrives. Key techs include the Tier 2 Luftwaffe Officer Quarters upgrade to get your units to Vet 1. I typically get this after I've got a few of the Verbal Winds out and the Martyrs. Getting out the units and having that quantity is important, and then following through later on with the veterancy. But be sure to use the breakthrough ability to rapidly capture the map upon counter-attack play, because this allows you to solidify your position by planting mines and sandbags with the 3 Pioneers that are roaming the map. It is not a munition-intensive build, this one, so planting mines, spamming the breakthrough ability, and the occasional Panzerfaust is all you really need to invest the munitions for. Counterplay against this Wehrmacht strategy comes down to good combined arms play from the allies. If you go too heavy on the infantry, the 221 Scout Car and Verbal Wind will punish you, and overinvest into support weapons and tech, you might find yourself being outcapped by the breakthrough Axis infantry. So it's about finding that balance. Listen in the fog of war and try to set up ambushes to take out the unsuspecting Verbal Wind with a Stuart or Chaffee to chase down timed attacks with an anti-tank gun round and a snare. Invest into progressive upgrades on infantry sections, especially the recce's and the rifleman bars, to dwindle down the grenadiers, pioneers, and their manpower to expose a hole in the fluid axis lines. For Dak's metagame, speed and early game aggression has been the defining characteristics, with the bike and the Bersaglieri running out of the gates to claim an early game foothold on key map positions. Typically, this is aimed at denying the allies to fuel or inflicting an early triple VP drain. First thing to do in this game is to commit to the early strategy by locking in the Italian Combined Arms battle group and calling in a Bersaglieri. Complete the left-hand side as the CPs roll in by getting the 6-man Bursa squad with the LMGs. From there, picking the right side to suit the game, but generally I pick the strafe and the cheap light vehicles with a commitment to tier 1 and tier 2 builds to close out the game with persistent pressure. So the build order goes by calling in that first Bursa and bringing it to a key position map that you want to pressure, whether that's a key garrison, fuel, or a point of interest. The Pioneer and the bike can secure your own fuel income in the rear. Get one bike and its role is to cap and deny captures to the opponent. Bring it to the fight when you've got the opportunity to swarm and outnumber alongside the Bersaglieri. Aim to get the Vet 1 on the bike as quickly as possible. From there, follow up with a couple more Bursas and then invest into the tier 1 tech structure. The flak half-track is the priority unit for the power spike that it gives. If the fuel is not available yet, consider getting an MG34 to help lock down the map that's been taken, or a Panzerjäger if there is an overly aggressive Jeep or Dingo on the field. After the flak half-track is fielded, any floating manpower, endeavour to invest that into the extra health and escape artist smoke onto the flak half-track. Persist with more tier 1 pressure after that to win the game. You can win the game early through pressure, and this should be the intent. Be mindful, Bersaglieri do not trade manpower effectively into the late game. You do not need to tech further to close out the game, but you may consider going tier 2 when there is fuel dominance in your advantage, and you might need to pressure an allied anti-tank gun and infantry position if required. But be mindful, if you're just sitting on the 3 VPs, they're going to start ticking and forcing the allied player to take some risk. Allied counters to this strategy in the early game involve well-positioned infantry that are not overextended or spread out. Use cover and progressively leap from cover to cover to build up map control. The bike and the Bersaglieri rely on catching isolated infantry out of cover, which they can easily do with the vision advantage from the bike and the speed of the Bursas. Make sure you hold on to 1 VP, as a triple VP deficit in the early game plays into the favour of the Bersaglieri, who do not scale as effectively as riflemen or infantry sections in the late game. Dak tends to win the game with this strategy by the 15 to 20 minute mark. Once the game moves into the late game and a combination of mainline infantry via riflemen, infantry sections, and anti-tank guns and light vehicles are present, such as AT options from the Shafi, Humber, or Stuart, it can become problematic from the DAC player's point of view to counter. My advice, hang in there, don't panic, and just progressively build your way up the map as allies. British forces don't have access to the capping speed of the other factions, but their ability to hold the ground that they have taken is superior to all the others. This comes from the strength of the infantry sections and their ever-reliable support weapons backed up by light vehicles. Infantry sections are the backbone of the army, in particular the recce upgrade squads, which can be used to provide early vision, firepower, and punish infantry both in and out of cover when they're at Vet 1. Light vehicles such as the Humber, Stuart, they provide the necessary mobility, and the support weapons deal with the major threats of vehicles or blobbed infantry. British forces have 2 meta strategies depending on if they're up against Wehrmacht or DAC, and they're based around 2 different battle groups. We're going to look at both. Canadian Shock Battle Group is menacing for Wehrmacht with their pyrotechnic grenades hunting down support weapons and unsuspecting infantry. Whilst, just like the Rats of Tobruk, the Australian Defence Battle Group is a formidable roadblock for DAC, turning the tide of the war with their 2-pounder anti-tank gun and over-repaired vehicles. The 2-pounder anti-tank gun is the best anti-tank gun in the game when it comes to dealing with light vehicles, which is the backbone of the manpower efficient play for DAC until a Stug D comes along. Even when the Stug D threat is present, some over-repaired Stuarts and flanking infantry sections can make quick work of that threat when there's an anti-tank gun putting in a couple of big punches. Starting with the British forces build order versus Wehrmacht, you want to build 1 Royal Engineer to improve the early game capping power and provide sandbag construction at key points. Follow this up with 3 infantry sections to poke and to hold the ground. Getting attacking spirit at 1 CP so infantry sections can heal on the field is really important. If successful, this can lead to a no healing required in the early game from your base, and you can create a threatening timing attack via the Humber. One Vickers, mortar, or even an additional infantry section based on what the opponent's strategy is. The Vickers heavy machine gun is good if they're blobbing a lot of mobile infantry like MP40 Grands, or a mortar if they're going for support weapons, and might be going for terror battle group with the ambush MG42s. Honestly though, with British forces you can get away with anything in the early game builds order if you execute it well. Get out the tier 2 though for the Humber. The Humber's an important unit because it does allow you to be aggressive and contain the Wehrmacht's expansion and deal with the 221 Scout car. Stack on the recce upgrades, get that vision going and shoot flares to constantly understand where the Wehrmacht position is moving to. Get an anti-tank grunt if necessary, maybe even 2 if they're massing verbal vins. After this, commit to anti-infantry units and infantry training tech until armor can be obtained. Upgrade grenades once the CPs are required for pyrotechnics to instantly destroy any support weapon crews from long range. Humber can be refitted later on to accelerate Crusader tank production, or if the verbal vin mass becomes established. The verbal vins are a threat to the Humber. Make Crusaders, or if the opportunity arises to pack a punch with the Crocodile Churchill arrives, then absolutely go for it. Next up, the British Forces build order versus DAC involves getting one Royal Engineer to improve the early game capping power and sandbag construction, similar to the Wehrmacht matchup, but then it starts to deviate. We get an infantry section after that to get the capping, but then get a Dingo. The Dingo is a bully to the bike and the 250 half-track that DAC fields. Consider using it as a mobile sandbag as well for the infantry section whilst the Royal Engineers flank the sides. Try to harass with the Dingo without overextending it or having its HP drop too low, especially now that the Panzer Jaegers can be built earlier due to the reduced cost. But keeping it repaired shouldn't be too difficult with that additional Royal Engineer on the field. Get 2 more sections, bringing the total up to 3. Now, if a DAC light vehicle threat is present, you can go for the 2 pounder prior to teching and using the fuel for healing to preserve manpower. Alternatively, tech for the tier 2 Humber. Stack on those recce upgrades, consider getting a Stuart to put on some mobile AT pressure. Even multiple Stuarts with over repair is a massive threat for DAC. If they are committing to a Stug D, then also looking to get in the 6-pounder anti-tank gun from the tech structure, because the Stug D is a serious threat to the 2-pounder. It can A, move directly head on into it and take it out. The 2-pounder will not consistently penetrate the Stug D unless it has Vet 1. The second anti-tank gun will also give 2 angles of attack, so when you combine that with the Stuart flank or engine busting abilities from the tank commander upgrade, it can be dealt with a Stug D pretty readily. And if you chuck in the snare there too, it's a gone vehicle. After this, commit to infantry training tech until armor can be obtained via the over-repaired Crusaders. When it comes to counterplay versus British forces for Axis players, it comes down to outplaying them with combined arms and using the mobility of the Axis forces to the advantage via the Scout Car, the Flak Half-Track, and the Stug D. Whilst the 2-pounder anti-tank gun can hurt these units, if vision is maintained of its position, it can be worked around. Just be careful of its wide firing arc and fire rate. Catch the infantry sections on the move and out of cover, and they will be forced to retreat. Infantry sections are not good at shooting on the move. Vision from the 221 Scout Car or DAC bike will make the decision of when to bring the Axis infantry up to catch them in no man's land really easily done. I quite like the British forces versus Axis matchups. Even in meta mode, there's still a feeling that the best player will come out ahead through effective unit usage and strategic decisions. Albeit there are a few balance tweaks to make it fairer, but both sides have multiple viable strategies and counterplay. It's in a good place. I hope this video gives you a helpful look into the metagame at present and gives you ideas on how to tackle those meta plays moving into the future. Be sure to watch through my narrated gameplay series in the description to see each faction's meta strategies in actions. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye!